I'm really excited to be here. It's normally I'm supposed to say that I feel honored, etc. But actually, I've been here in the hills since day before yesterday. I had another program in Darjeeling Government College. Now here at Rachna. I cannot express my feelings. I'm excited, I'm scared, I'm terrified. I have a couple of familiar faces from the hills here who are, little explosions of memories are happening. So it's a very complex feeling to express. And in a sense, through these events, the last event, yesterday's events in Darjeeling Government College and this one, and tomorrow there is another program lined up. This whole process is coming to a full circle because these two books, particularly Nobody in Darjeeling is Straight, was taking shape inside me. Although I was not planning to write a book on Darjeeling. About 25 years back, when I came to Darjeeling as a young teacher, fresh out of university, as a young man, and Ishadda was my senior colleague there, and Ranju was one of my students, very bright student. And from that time to now, after all these two books have been published and somewhat accepted by a few readers, they have found readers, especially readers here in Darjeeling and also Sikkim. It is a sense of fulfillment. It is a sense of completion of something. It is we have a. I was saying that it's a sort of a pilgrimage. A pilgrimage has we say tirtha. Tirtha means crossing. So it's a sort of a crossing for me. It's really something. These two books came out almost within a space of a couple of years. Nobody in Darjeeling State was published in 2017, in July. At a time, it was a very difficult time for Darjeeling Hills, as Raman mentioned. And this one, Bells of Shangri-la, just I think a month back. But I have been writing books in Bangla for quite some time. I'm basically a Bengali reader, but now I love to introduce myself as a bilingual reader because this is something very fashionable now. And both these books are, I wouldn't say translations, but transcreations, because I myself have turned them into English. Transcreations in the sense that these books have traveled languages, two languages, and they have changed in the meanwhile. Darjeeling book in Bengali came out in 2009 January. It's exactly 10 years, and it has been very well received in the plains of Bengal, among the Bengalis. I wrote that book at a very difficult time. I wrote that book in the context of 2007, the agitations, and we all know the changes, the political upheaval and all. And what I found in Kolkata and surroundings in the Bengalis, there was so much wrong information, wrong ideas, skewed perspectives. And I having been here for 5 years, lived here, I have friends, ex-students, and it was my second home, Darjeeling. When I found out that the way Darjeeling and especially its people were being portrayed in the media among the middle classes, so I had a sort of despair and anger. In fact, in those times, I used to write regular newspaper columns in two popular newspapers, one English and another Bengali, both incidentally belonging to a single house. You would understand, I wouldn't name them. And I wanted to write columns about Darjeeling, but initially they said, okay, write, and then they refused because they had this policy that they wouldn't subscribe to the ideology of a separate state or self-rule, etc. So, in that sense of despair and anger, I wrote that book. But I am not a political scientist, I am not a political commentator, I am not a sociologist, I am a student of literature. My take would naturally be amateurish. I couldn't go into the nitty-gritty of politics, so I tried to delve into my memories. And that way the book came out. I tried to piece together my memories and the various narratives on the starting from the colonial empire builders to the writers who have written about Darjeeling, the bloggers and all. So all these voices and my memories were like glue, which glued together all these several strands of narratives together, and the book came out in Bengali. That was 10 years back. And then after that, for some time, many of my friends were prodding me to, why don't you write it in English, because so that you can reach out. Your people about whom you have written, they should also know what you have written, etc. So I began to translate it. I wouldn't say translate, I can transcreate, because I had to change a lot of things. Otherwise, there is no point actually in rewriting the same book. So the book came out in 2017. That too, at a very difficult phase in Darjeeling's history. You remember, it was very fresh in our memories. Somehow, after that, this Bells of Shangri-la, that also is very much connected to Darjeeling and Sikkim. It's mainly about some people who lived in Darjeeling. And Darjeeling, for Bells of Shangri-La, Darjeeling is a context, was a frontier town, a staging post from where the spies were sent. Those who have read the book, maybe we'll be talking in detail about it. So these exciting stories, I got to learn about them, and I pieced them together. The forgotten men, the heroes of history. And that way, Bells of Shangri-La came out. And so these are the two English books that I have. But in Bengali, I have written on many subjects. But basically, I see myself as a storyteller, as someone who pieces together narratives and connect narratives. I trace narratives. That way I see myself. I think that's enough of an introduction.
You just shortened my question. So, I think 2017, No Path in Darjeeling came out, and when I bought the copy as soon as it came here, and I really enjoyed the book. And then that's when I told Raman, you must get you here. No Path in Darjeeling is straight. Is, if I may say so, it's basically his memoirs during his time in Darjeeling as a lecturer. I think he came to Darjeeling in '93 as a lecturer. That was his first appointment there. And then the book is basically his time in Darjeeling and also the history of Darjeeling through his eyes. So it's a very evocative book. That's what comes out. And you start from cabin tours, then you see all these hotels, and then end up at Mall Road. But that is not only what he talks about. He goes down the Chorbatos of Darjeeling, goes to the unseen places by tourists. He searches for salamanders. He goes for treks in the Shangri-la range and all. So it's a very lovely book. I think I would like to start with the question, what is Darjeeling to you?
3 days back, there was a program in Siliguri, Shangri-La Literary Festival. The topic of the discussion was context and text. So I'd like to, from where I would take it. Darjeeling has been a context of many narratives, starting with the colonial, those empire builders who wanted a hill station near Kolkata because Shimla was quite far, and they found the climate which made them nostalgic. Some of them, they used to call it home weather. The clouds, the fog, the dampness and all, the cold, the chill. And so they built it after the fashion, after their own fashion, and they sort of, they wrote text, their own in their own fashion. The entire landscape of Darjeeling, the hillscape, was changed to suit their needs. And Darjeeling, as we see it now, was completely different before, say, 1860s or 1850s. Darjeeling, 1840s or 50s, Darjeeling was completely different. It was covered with forests, giant trees, etc. I think Waddell is writing in 1899. He's ruining the fact that Darjeeling has lost everything. Only one or two trees to remind us of what it had been before. That he is writing in 1890s. So you can imagine what it was before. So Darjeeling was a context for and the dream of an empire to be built, a hill station where they could come, especially where they would send their Mem Sahibs and Baba Logs during the scorching summer. And that was one thing. The next was after independence, Darjeeling, or before that, there was Darjeeling became a context, a space for people from all over the hills to come. It was a magnet that pulled people from different parts of these hill regions, from the very divided caste-ridden societies of Nepal. When people migrate, there are, as we all know, two factors, the push and the pull factors. So both were there. People from caste-ridden societies came, people came for opportunities. And that way, people from various ethnicities, from various religions, various faiths, came together and built a town, the working class so-called. They also had a Darjeeling. So from all these narratives, a text had built up. It's a very layered text. For Bengalis, there is another Darjeeling, which is completely there. It's a tourist spot, and they have, in my book it's there, as those who have read, they have studied it with points, it's studied with points, invisible points to go. It's like a confection, a touristic confection. So all these narratives together are layered, and all are individual memories. But when you ask me what Darjeeling is for you, for the last 3 days I had been in Darjeeling and I was also searching that question. I left Darjeeling nearly 20 years back, and I was very scared to come over here because I had this nostalgia of, I know I won't find it. And initially it was like, it has always been like that. This time also I was telling my friends that you see, memory is like yeast. It's like it does what it does to the dough. It makes it puff up. So all the spaces, it seemed, had shrunk. Shangri-La, bar and restaurant seemed to have shrunk. Darjeeling Government College seemed to have shrunk. That was visually, because in our memories, the visual memories dominate. But that is not the only memory. But then as I was roaming about, I went down along the convent road towards the Loretta Convent School, and there in the afternoon the children were playing, and their laughter and noises were coming up, reaching me. And I suddenly remembered, these are another type of memories which are there, which have remained the same. For 2 days, Darjeeling had a very beautiful weather, and there was a breeze in the pine trees and birds calling and all. That is another thing, and I could smell the familiar smells which I have. So these are there. But more importantly, some of my deepest personal memories came out. I was in Darjeeling when my father died, and the news reached me late in the afternoon. And unlike now, normally the traffic, it was very difficult to to catch a taxi or to have a car to rush to Siliguri and then to Kolkata. So my father, I couldn't see him. He was cremated before I could reach there. So that feeling of when I was rushing, my friends hired a car late in the evening, and I was going the night, the night views of Darjeeling, and those feelings are somehow inscribed. I could find on the hillscapes. My daughter was born here, and she was there until she was 4, and she learned to walk on Darjeeling. And those memories of joy and those things, these are also inscribed on Darjeeling. And then I thought that those written things, the narratives that I have pieced together, that I have found, mostly colonial writings, and later on some local writers, Nepalese writers and others. These are actually minuscule things of what Darjeeling contains in terms of memory. Any place contains, but Darjeeling has so many layers of it. There is a poet you know, Guru Ladakhi, a local poet. Guru was telling me, actually we met at the Shangri-la Fest in Siliguri. Guru was telling me that when he was very young, he used to live in Gangtok, and his father would sometimes once or twice a year would take him and his brother to Darjeeling. And he was saying that, we couldn't sleep at night. For us, Darjeeling was like Paris. And we were so excited and all. So, all Darjeeling, the space is imbued with so much of memories, so much of excitement and all. So, that is something I found. To me, Darjeeling is all that, all these memories when I look at that. So that hillscape is like that. Someone had said, I forget whom, that if you open a person, inside him or her, you will find a landscape. So we all carry landscapes or hillscapes. Darjeeling is such a hillscape or landscape that is worth carrying inside. That's what it is to me.
If anyone has read the book, you'll find that the book is an ode to Darjeeling, like you say now. But when you begin the book, the first chapter itself, it starts on a very bleak note. It starts with the continuous rain, the impenetrable fog, then there's a lot of depression and suicidal tendencies in the air. So I was just wondering that why did you start off on such a bleak note?
Yes, it's like in human relations. We can say that we really love a person when we love that person's odd aspects, unpleasant aspects and all, so-called unpleasant aspects, when you love the blemishes. So Darjeeling's this bleak weather, depressing weather, when it took some time, of course. In fact, I had never been able to cope up with that. It was so, it had depressed many people actually. For nearly 3 months, you can see the face of the sun. And, I used to be a tenant in a rented house, and most of these houses, modern day houses, were built on the sides of the hills. And normally the landlords would occupy the higher floors, which are well lighted, and we were the basement sort of things were less light and air and all, and the musty smells and all these things. Initially, I found it very difficult to cope with. And then, after about 2 years, I began to like it. And I think that is the spirit of Darjeeling. And that is the time when the real spirit of Darjeeling also comes out. Something I have not mentioned here, just it struck me yesterday that I have missed it, is that during that time when there are no tourists, many of the shops are closed. Used to be, not now of course. Now I think Darjeeling is tourists are there crowded almost throughout the year, but I am talking about 20-25 years back. The malls would be lonely, those horses would be taken to the stables and nothing much there. At that time, very old people, the old Darjeelingese, many of them Tibetans and Buddhists, they would come out and sit on those benches and with their prayer beads and all and chat among themselves. So that is another Darjeeling that comes out. So unless you fall in love with that part of Darjeeling, you don't love Darjeeling at all. And since you mentioned that weather, it had taken its toll. Many people had committed suicide and all. So I thought that it would be a good way to begin with a rather less talked about, less celebrated aspect of Darjeeling, and let's start with that. So that was the idea actually.
Okay. Your book, throughout your book, you talk about the social economic condition of the people, of all the strata, right from the tourist to the porter, right? And then what I like about it is it's not like a PhD thesis at all. It's like you are telling stories, and behind the story of a person, you are telling the story of the group. So, like Newton represents the quest for Gorkha land. Then you have Pratap Lama, your student, who like represents the aspiration of the young generation. And same way, through your search for Guniye, he's a character in Satyajit Ray's Kanchenjunga. You go into the people who don't see those aspects of the town. And then with Julia, again, you talk about the Lepcha settlement, the hunt for the Lepcha settlement in the forest. You talk about the status of the Lepchas in Darjeeling. Would you like to share, you want to pick up any one of them? And I think I really liked this guy also. It's a very sad story, Benson Kunjo.
Yes.
But then you talk about the HIV status in Darjeeling. So probably if you could pick up any two of them.
Let's start with that boy, Gunye, I think. It's in Bengali, it's Gunye or Gunye, because Satyajit Ray in Bengali had written it Gunye.
Yeah, okay.
So that's what in Bengali is Gunye, I don't know, it's Gunye. Anyway. It's very interesting, after the book came out, many people began to ask me, where is Gunye? Did you find him? I said, no. And two reporters from Kolkata came, one from Anandabajar Patrika, and they incidentally discovered that person, found out that person. He was in his 60s then, I don't know whether he's still alive or not. He used to live in Chowk Bazaar and taken an interview, and he confirmed that yes, I was that boy whom Satyajit Ray had used. But since you are talking about Satyajit Ray and Kanchenjunga, especially that film, there too, Darjeeling is just a context. The text of Darjeeling doesn't enter. Darjeeling is a setting.
Background, yeah.
It's a background. It remains a setting for the stories of an upper middle class Kolkata family of a young girl about her marriage prospects and all. Darjeeling doesn't enter except very briefly through a boy, and that boy plays a very key role in the movie. And in fact, the theme music of that film has been picked up from that boy. I tried to think about these characters, these faces, or these voices, which I found were never. Gunye was hardly and he doesn't talk. He doesn't talk. He's mute. And interestingly, Satyajit Ray had said, and that is in Andrew Robinson's book, and I think I also quoted it, that for me, Gunye is Darjeeling. So here is a boy who doesn't have voice. So the voiceless Darjeeling, and it has been always the case whenever Darjeeling comes into the narratives of mainstream Bengali culture, Darjeeling comes as a context, as a setting. Even in movies, most of the movies, I have not seen Barfi or some other recent movies which are made on Darjeeling. But Darjeeling is just a setting. It's a picture postcard setting. And that was another reason, to come back to your last question, why I started with that link thing. That it's just the flip side of the picture postcard Darjeeling, that is. So I thought that what are these missing voices, the silenced voices that need to be talked about? And Benson Kunju Kunju, yesterday in the event there was one teacher from St. Joseph's College, and he, at the question answer session, he said that he asked me who was Benson Kunju Kunju, because I tried to search out in St. Joseph College's history. There was no teacher named Benson Kunju Kunju. So who was he? So sometimes it is very difficult to say, because none of the characters in that sense are exactly. I have there are layers. So I have fictionalized some aspects. I have taken some other character, put him or her in some other places. So it's not. It would be difficult to say who was who. But yes, that sad story of the tea gardens. Even in early 90s, the tea gardens were in a very bad shape. There was rampant unemployment, poverty in the tea gardens. And I've seen the aspirations. Another interesting thing, yesterday I found in the evening we were roaming down the back mall, and I wanted to locate the lights of Jorthang, because that was something which we used to do, late in the evening, after spending the long evenings in some small, quiet pubs, mostly city pubs, because in those days we didn't have much money. Government didn't used to pay us well as they do now, better. Well, so after that, we used 2 or 3 hours, and we were, unmarried and young, we used to walk along that back mall, and we used to, in the darkness, in the sea of, dark waves of sea, it used to appear like sea, especially on, there was no moon in the sky, and there would be tucked away in the valleys, there would be suddenly a glow of light. That was Jorthang. Sometimes one of my friends, after 4 or 5 pegs, he used to invent Jorthang, the lights of Jorthang. And we too, if we had been with him for long, at the same mental state, we also used to find. But yesterday evening, I couldn't find Jorthang's lights, because there are so many lights. Villages have come up, and electricity had also gone, but in 90s most of these villages were dark, or not even. And Darjeeling, I have seen from Tuya there is no such village as Tuya. I gave that name because that name has this sound of a bird song, Tuya. But there was villages around Rimbik, from where we used to trek a lot. If you look at when you looked at Darjeeling, it was a glowing town, and it used to, call entice, and it used to give a pull. And now, after hearing Guru Ladakhi's told me that about his experience of their sleeplessness and Darjeeling, thinking Darjeeling as their Paris, I can understand what kind of aspirations, what kind of excitements it used to make to our students. In fact, many of our students have left Darjeeling. This is happening throughout Bengal, but especially in Darjeeling also. From the villages, I don't know how to put it this way. Villages are producing bright young people. Naturally, but villages don't have the opportunities. They are migrating to towns and cities. Many of my students are from villages, but they don't go back, and the villages are dying. And as Arundhati Rai had said, that towns and cities die screaming, villages die silently. The villages die actually, and especially now many of the tea gardens closed or sick. The villages are in bad shape, the villages are dying. So I think I have digressed a bit. My student Ronju will know that I could never finish the syllabus or be to the point. So it's my book is also is a rambling. So I'm shifting. Maybe I'm sorry. I'm shifting from it. But most of the characters, yes. One character, Pratibha Datta, favorite of mine, the old lady. There was a lady in Darjeeling like her. But of course, I have added some layers. And there were people who had spent, Bengalis, educated, affluent Bengalis, who had spent a long time in Darjeeling, but they lived in their own cocoon. They were cocooned from the rest of the world. They didn't. They had their own Darjeeling, and that own Darjeeling was restricted to Chaurasta and up to the Hillcut Road. There would be the Glenaries, the Caventers, Oxford Bookstore, and that was the Darjeeling. That was their Darjeeling. But that Darjeeling was, of course, important. It was there. But one character which you have not mentioned, it's not a character actually, it's a species. I would like to talk about it. Yes, salamander. I just picked up salamander because salamander is an iconic species, so to say. I don't know whether the word iconic is the right word, but it can be a flagship species. So much of flora and fauna, so many varieties of trees and plants and birds and insects. Darjeeling, and if I extend the term, not just the town, but Darjeeling Hills also belong to them. Unfortunately, in my book, because I wrote that book in a particular context of human aspirations, of people's movements and struggles, they don't feature in a big way. But I think that is another aspect, because we talk about people's rights, but what about the rights of these different life forms, which many of these life forms have not yet been properly catalogued, or there is no proper taxonomy or cataloging of these, and we don't know. Maybe they hold some keys to our future survival. Many of them are dying. The forests are being cleared. There is rampant ecological destruction. And when I think of the movements, the people again and again for more than 100 years, people have agitated for self-rule. And many of them have sacrificed their lives, and they have come out on the streets and demanded self-rule and sacrificed their lives, not for themselves but for their future generations. But if these species, the plants, these other animals, other life forms vanish, what kind of world our next generation will have? Who will tell about them? That is something I was thinking for the last 3 days, that maybe these narratives need to be told, because these Darjeeling Hills, and that also includes Sikkim, two important things: ecologically so rich and ecologically so fragile. Very little human intervention can do havoc, and it had done havoc. It is being done since Darjeeling was built. That is the paradox, that since when Darjeeling came about, the tea gardens began and the trees were cut down, this has started, and the process is now accelerating. So we have come a long way from characters to salamanders to...
Basically, it's, like you say, it's the miscarriages of planning.
Exactly. So miscarriages of planning and very skewed concept of development. Because some changes I see whenever I come to Darjeeling and the hills generally. The use of granite and marble and steel. Just imagine you are quarrying granite from Aravalli mountains, destroying the ecology there, burning tons of gallons of fossil fuel to bring them here. What's the point? I mean, we trying to reimagine ourselves according to some first world notion of development. But that very concept of development is suicidal. In the plains, of course, but then in the plains it has a more robust environment and more robust ecology. It can withstand it, but in the hills, ecology is very rich, and equally it's very fragile as well. Because if you build concrete structures, an earthquake can and landslips always occur. It does. All the jhoras have become drains. We have made them into sewers and drains. So this is something, this very idea of development have to be challenged, and that has to be political. It has to be in the political agenda. I don't know any party, whatever party, to reimagine development, to rethink about, because that is our future.
If you go on a lighter note, you also talk about how the Darjeeling train came to Darjeeling.
Yes.
The effort, the people, how they came and built the railway, which is such a tough time. But then I found this little nugget where when it couldn't climb, then that reverse track.
Yeah.
Idea of the reverse track came in. So
Yeah.
if you could just tell them.
Yes, there are lots of such anecdotes. Yes, one I found that, one thing is remarkable about the light Himalayan railway, Darjeeling Himalayan railway, is that there is not a single tunnel. You think of Shimla, from Kalka to Shimla, the toy train passes through more than 100 tunnels, because they always found the right gradients and the shortest route. But in Darjeeling, they had this idea that they would have, uncluttered view of the hills. So not a single tunnel. That's why the railway tracks are very twisted. And at some places, at one particular place, the gradient was so steep that the engineer who was assigned the job of, mapping that thing, he couldn't align the lines properly, and it was taking time, and his wife was away in Kolkata and she was getting restless, and just as all wives are experts of everything, and they she said that you can't do this, it's very simple. He said, no, it's very difficult, how to align. And she said, what do you do in ball dance when you come to a corner? We just take a reverse step and move forward. And the engineer said, wow! And he naturally, that was a great thing. And in Darjeeling there are, I think, many such reverses where the train, because the climb is so sharp that the train goes back a little and picks up momentum and then swings up. That also had to do with, I think, the coal-driven engines I get. In modern days, with the diesel engines, which are more powerful, they can easily pull them out. So, again, a constraint in technology became a lovely invention, which also reflected that thing. And it was romance. It was a site for romance. And in Aradhana, for example, I have also mentioned it. You see that the rails and the pathways, how the romances. It is these romances actually that have created that nostalgia. And for Bengalis especially, this nostalgia is so strong that if you try to tell them other stories, they are not going to hear it. They always wear these blinkers of nostalgia. And day before yesterday, one of my friends who came with me from Kolkata, he was conversing with me, Partho Gangubadhyay, a colleague of mine. He came with his family, and he, just to write the thing, he took a trip from Darjeeling to Ghum. And he said it's very costly. How much? Something like 1,000 rupees or more for a 200-hour ride. I said, you did that? He said, no, I had to ride the rails. I couldn't do anything else. So these romances of the light Himalayan railways, yes, that as you said. And in fact, another thing, for a long time after Pagla Jhora, I think most of us here are familiar with the terrain, that there was a great landslip there, and the Hillcut Road is closed actually to traffic. Not closed because there are villages in between Karshiang and Sukna, but no traffic there. And last time, 5-6 years back, I took parts of that road just to see how a busy road, when it's out of use, how it looks. And it was like, it was like a river which has died. So there are creepers hanging from the trees, the weeds breaking out of asphalt, and most of the shops closed and rusted. So it's a ghost. That is another piece of Darjeeling. Darjeeling is creating these things as well. And I was reminded of Hope Town, that there was near Sonada, Margaret Hope's tea garden. A town was supposed to be built, and people had bought land and a church had come up. But because the road and the railway lines were taken along another reach, that Hope Town died. It is a dead town. So these it would be academically saying microhistories, or I'd like to say chorbatos, are what really have created Darjeeling.
And probably the Pimba's umbrella, you would say.
Yes, Pimba is a very popular among my Bengali readers. I don't know how people who have read the book, how they take Pimba. Pimba is a very favorite of mine as well. Here is a man who is living with so little things. Pimba crosses a hill to come to a village where his uncle has died, and his uncle had said that Pimba would inherit his umbrella. That umbrella, shepherd's umbrella, big. It's the main rod is made of bamboo, and there are those cane things, And all these things have been changing. The cane structures have changed. The cloth, the fabric had changed. But the umbrella has remained the same. It's the same umbrella. It like the ship of Theseus. But now I look at it from a different angle. The last 2-3 days I was hearing from my friends about 105 days Bandh and how some people were surviving. And I think I was talking with Raman about it. That some old village people who know about herbs and roots in the jungles, which the new generation have forgotten, because there is food in them, there is money in the pocket and food in the market. So when either both or one of them vanishes, many of my friends and acquaintances had money, but no food in the market. Some people had neither. So these old people, they began to go to the forests, and with them, the younger generations, and they picked up the herbs and the roots and all, and they learned to survive. And I was thinking, so you see, suddenly in a Bandh, in a very difficult situation, some ancient wisdom, how it is revived, how it is coming back to life. And Pimba for me symbolizes that world, with a piece of chupi in his pocket, a talisman and a kukri. He can cross mountains just to get an umbrella. So, and this is Pimba. Maybe Pimba is for us the future, because of the depleting resources, the devastated ecology, and there's again some bleak note maybe wanted to make it lighter, but I cannot do that. But environmentalists say that in 30 years, 50% of the species would vanish from Earth. What kind of world it would be? Many, the younger among us would still be there, would be very much there in 30 years or 20 years. How the world would be. And Pimbas would be the future, because Pimbas would survive. And Pimbas did survive during the 105 days Bandh. Who knew the food in the forest? There had been so many famines in the 19th century in India, but the tribes never died. I have a book on tribal thing, and it's in Bengali, unfortunately.
Okay.
So the tribe, all those agriculturalists had died, the townspeople had died, but the tribal people who knew how to survive, foraging, picking, they never died. So this knowledge is important, and Pimba for me epitomizes that knowledge.
Moving on, like to talk about that 100 days Bandh, take it up from there. In your book you say that from Darjeeling to Kolkata is 623 kilometers.
Exactly.
but again, in terms of minds, it can be 623 light years away. So they don't meet, the Bengali mind and the mind in Darjeeling. So, why is a Bengali so possessive about Darjeeling?
Yes. It's a very valid question, very important question. That question I've been asking myself for so many years. I have a take on this, I should say. You see, Bengal had been, and Kolkata especially, and for many Bengalis, Kolkata and Bengal are synonymous, although it should not be so, but it's like that. Kolkata had been the center, power center of the Indian subcontinent for more than 100 years after let's say late 18th century to 1915, when the capital was shifted to Delhi. And suddenly Kolkata became a provincial town. And then Kolkata's decline began. Bengal presidency used to have this entire Odisha, Bihar and Bengal together. These were divided. So the just try to imagine what a Bengali's frame of mind in late 19th and early 20th century. It encompassed the entire, it was Bengal, they are going to Odisha and they are the dominant class. In Bihar also, all the white collar, all the doctors, the lawyers, the advocates, the teachers, all were Bengalis. So it was like that. But after capital was shifted, after commerce went away from Kolkata, Kolkata dock-yard suffered a decline. After the Bengal presidency was divided, after partition, and it continued until 1970s during the left movements of militant trade unionism, and for other factors as well. There was the freight equalization, the thing that coal, which Bengal had this geographical and economic advantage of being near the coal mines. Coal was the engine of growth, mercantile growth in some time. But there was the coal, I think it was Bidan Rai's time, Nehru's time, coal was the same price everywhere. So all these steps, Bengal is being marginalized, it is becoming provincialized. So here is a mind which still has this, the lingering legacy of commanding a large thing is in reality shrinking. So they had only this Darjeeling and the British nostalgia there, which some of them accuse me of celebrating a lot in the book. And of course, because I tried to create that thing. It was like what we in Bangla say, Dadur Bagan Badi. That means our grandfather's country estate, which we cannot let go. So we have seen it that way, and that is the root of the problem. Bengalis have always thought of Darjeeling as ours, but Darjeeling is not just a place; it's also people. But they have never thought of people of Darjeeling as us. So there is this unbridgeable gap between ours and us that had never gone. And if you remember, even very recently, when there had been trouble, etc., all the media, all the newspapers, even the politicians are talking about the tourists only. The suffering was of the tourists. But tourists have gone there on their own. They'll manage to go back, and no tourist had been harmed. No tourist had starved. But we are only talking about maybe a couple of hundred people. What about the thousands of people who are suffering? So because of these blinkers that people are not us, the place is ours.
It's like in your book, your sympathy for the movement can be felt. You sympathize with the movement for Gorkhaland. So when your book came out in Bengali in 2009, how did the readers take it? Was it a case of it too brutus?
When we talk about Bengali mindset, when we talk about we tend to generalize. It's not that all Bengalis think. There are people, of course, who have a different view. Unfortunately, most of the times, they don't have a chance to get the other views. And the media, as I was telling in the introduction, that I tried to write columns, but media didn't want it. They have made it their policy. They have a very, a misconception that if we have another opinion, people wouldn't like that. But I can tell you that this whole West Bengal has so many crores of people. People live in villages. People are struggling. It's a very, they have their day-to-day lives. They are not bothered. I don't know. How much bothered they are about a place being part of Bengal or not. Whenever this thing comes up, everybody says, what about the tourists? I think now more tourists come to Sikkim than to Darjeeling Hills. Sikkim is another state, so what difference does it make? But a handful of, the middle classes, urban middle classes, they have this nostalgia, and we take them as the voice of all the Bengalis. That I don't think, and there are other voices as well. So when the book came out, yes, the book has done well. It struck a chord among many people. The book is, I think, now 5th or 6th reprint. So it sells constantly. It's getting new readers constantly. But no newspaper, no media, no magazine, no newspaper has reviewed the book yet.
Seriously?
Although very recently, an Oxford University told me, I heard had come out with an anthology on Darjeeling. Some British, I think someone from England has edited the book. I got a call from a major newspaper that would you review it. I declined it. I didn't say him that you didn't review my book, which is there for last 10 years. Why should I review another book? So it's like that. But it doesn't matter.
It doesn't
matter.
So, 2009, the book came out in Bengali as Darjeeling Smriti Samaj Itihas.
Yes. That's a very dull title,
yeah.
I know. But my publisher, I wanted to be Darjeeling to me car, which comes as a refrain. In English, I have translated it. It's not a very happy translation. Darjeeling, who do you belong to?
Yeah.
And in order to make it natural, I also put in that song. There is a song, Who Do You Belong To? But it is not there in the Bengali version. But to make it sound natural, I had to bring it. But it is not a very happy translation of Darjeeling to me car. In fact, I got the cue from an advertisement which Kolkata Municipal Corporation used to use. Kolkata to me car. And they would have a child, a naked slum dweller, a child, cover, and Nirendranath Chakraborty, a Bengali poet, whose poem Kolkata Jishu, that child is the face of Kolkata. That's what he said. Kolkata tumi kar. But Kolkata, during the last 20 years, Kolkata has been shedding, has been forgetting, erasing its, the subclass, the working classes. They are being marginalized, pushed out. Gated communities are coming up. Shopping malls are being. Kolkata Tumi Kar, I had written a column. So then I thought Darjeeling Tumi Kar. I wanted the book to be Darjeeling Tumi Kar, but then my publisher said that people would think it's a novel, and nobody likes to read novels. So make it. It's like a Darjeeling Smriti Samaj Itihas, memories, society, and history. So it's almost like a packet of Maggi or something where all the ingredients are written, so that the buyer can know that what is inside. This is the way of thinking. Similarly in English also, Memories of a Hill Town. So it's a Memories of a Hill Town.
The English title No Path in Darjeeling District is such a lovely title. How did the title come about?
Yeah, actually that, as I told you, the book was written in the context of And every time, I think there are 3 or 4 major uprisings since 1911, if you count now. Every time it seems that something is near at hand, it's coming. For example, when there was this long burn, people thought that now something is going to happen. But then it receded. It's like a
mirage,
hill path, because it seems you're coming close to that tree, but then again the road swerves and you have to round a bend, and again, so no path is straight. And especially the micro-histories, the chorbatos, because without these chorbatos, without these people, without their histories, without the history of Shiloh, a villager, I couldn't get many stories like this. There must be many who from remote villages had come to Darjeeling to build their future, and they are still coming. It's still happening. The lights that I saw yesterday night in the valleys, many of the people are coming around. So these stories have created what it is. So there's no path. There's no path in Darjeeling straight. That's right.
And how did the English edition come about? How did it happen? Why so late?
Actually, I have been writing books in Bengali. I have around 10 books. Yeah. Many of these books are almost always, thankfully, sometimes I'm really fortunate in that sense, because it's not that Bengali publishing world and my Bengali readership is very thriving and it's like that. But somehow I have managed to have readers, and not huge, but a committed group of readers, which is growing circle of readers. And I have been writing in Bengali. I was quite happy with that. But there were friends who were prodding me to, why don't you, especially Darjeeling book, people should read it, the people from Darjeeling should know. You should, people have wrong notions. People should also know, people from the hills should also know that there are people who are thinking a little differently from what you see in Anandabazar Potrika and all the news channels. It's not just that, there are people who think differently. So they were prodding me. One guy came up with, translated a bit of it and showed it to me. I didn't like it. So I thought I'll do it, but I am always in 2 minds. Even now, although I have another book lined up, I'm still working on it. That's also a transcreation. That whether I should write either originally in English or in Bengali, or I should do things. Some my friends say you do both, but I have to work. I don't have, it's very difficult to write. It takes a lot of energy and time. So I did the thing, especially into the 2016, I think I translated. It took me, incidentally, the Bengali book was written in 4 weeks flat. The English book, it took more time. It was more difficult to transcreate it. Because I had to be, although I was not a typical translator, it was my book. So I had no compulsion to be either faithful or beautiful. There is that saying about translations that you can only be faithful or beautiful, not both. It's a very sexist comment. I don't subscribe to that. But I had no compulsions to be faithful or beautiful. But still, to put it into English was something difficult. I didn't have any idea that it would find a mainstream publisher. Because it's very difficult, every week they are having these mountain truckloads of manuscripts, and they call it slush pile. That I also came to know later. They don't read. So I found out that there is a literary agent. There's a young literary agent, Kanishka Gupta, writer's site, who is very quick in answering. So I made a blind submission. I just translated 3 chapters and wrote a synopsis and I just sent him. I was not expecting anything. I have plan A, plan B, plan C. The plan A was if it works fine. Plan B was if it doesn't work, I would send it to my Bengali publisher who are eager to publish. But Bengali publisher doesn't have this kind of network. If my Bengali publisher had published it, it wouldn't end up in Raman's bookstore. No distribution network. So he liked it instantly, but he told me something that is also a revelation to me. That is also something I found. It was a discovery, and I think I should share this with you. He said that your book is very good, I loved it. And when I said there is an Bengali avatar of it. He couldn't believe it. He said, how come I can't imagine it was originally written in Bengali, etc. Okay. But he said, that, Parimal, I don't know who will buy this book because Darjeeling is a very marginal story. I said, why is it so? He said, yes. You might think that Darjeeling for Bengalis, for the people of Darjeeling is central, but in the Indian context, it's a very niche subject. Darjeeling, I don't know whether any publisher would think worth investing their money and time on it. And I began to, and then I found out, yes, he was not wrong actually, because for Bengalis, for the people of Darjeeling, Darjeeling is a center in some way, center of nostalgia and center of life. But think about South India, think about Mumbai, think about Chennai. They have their Uti, they have their Matheran, they have their Lonavala. India had around more than 60 odd hill stations. Now at least there are 12 or 13 hill stations which are still surviving. But it was my luck that I was thinking that two publishers might be interested. One of them was Speaking Tiger, the other was Aleph. My agent was known to Ravi Singh. Ravi Singh is the publisher, and he sent it, and Ravi instantly liked it. And I was also lucky, today he's not here. Both my books are edited by Anurag Basnet, who is a Kalimpong boy. So that also helped. Anurag read it and he found it out. But I was sharing this with Raman today, that Anurag had also told me that, Parimal, this is an excellent book, great book, but this book will not make you popular in Darjeeling Hills. People wouldn't like it. I said, do you think so? He said, yes. So I was very apprehensive whether how this book will be taken. So after the book was out, and that was an accident. That was a coincidence. Some of my friends said happy accidents, and it gave me a lot of pain. The book came out at a time when Darjeeling was passing through a very difficult phase. We know in 2017 July. That happy accident, they said, because that gave it publicity. Suddenly, all over India, newspapers from Mumbai Mirror to India Today to everyone was interested to know about that because of the movements, agitations and all. And the book got some amount of publicity. I don't think that was good publicity and I was also invited to lead fests and all. And whenever I had gone, I was asked these political questions. But this book is not exactly about that. It is about retelling of narratives, of reimagining of stories. So that part was missing. So in that sense, that was not a happy time. Even one journalist had asked me, do you think that book was timed because of this? So I said, what do you mean? You mean to say that because the book will be published, my publisher made the disturbances so that this book can sell well? That was a reputed journalist from a reputed newspaper had asked me this question. So it's like that.
I think we'll now move on to the next book. Okay. So the next book, I'm sure many of us are interested in. It's called Scholars, Spies, Invaders in Tibet.